So before the break, we discussed how the law is responding to the pandemic. In this segment, we take a look at how it's actually wreaking havoc with the court system. Now, dozens of federal courts, they've either closed or delayed trials, and at least 30 states have either restricted or suspended altogether jury trials and all in-person proceedings. Plus, for the first time since the Spanish flu epidemic all the way back in 1918, the Supreme Court has postponed oral arguments. That's going to delay several major cases, including, by the way, one that was supposed to begin at the beginning of this week, President Trump's bid to prevent the release of his tax returns. Plus, with police officers across the country getting sick or otherwise obviously occupied dealing with the crisis, investigations, they could also grind to a halt. Plus, active cases could turn cold as investigations are hampered. Let's bring back former federal prosecutor Berit Berger. And Berit, put on your hat as a federal prosecutor. I can only imagine right now you guys can't bring in people to interview. You can't pursue leads here because of obviously the concerns of the infections or all the different people that are being given in order to quarantine. Let's start first on the prosecution side. How much harder is it to build cases, especially when you can't bring cases in this environment?
I think it's much harder. As you alluded to, so much of what prosecutors do is really necessitated by face-to-face contact. So it's very difficult to interview a witness by the phone. So much of how you know if a witness is telling the truth or not depends on that face-to-face contact. I think it's hard for the investigators to build the cases. A lot of what they do is knocking on doors, getting people to talk to them. So I think it's much harder for prosecutors to do their job right now. There's also bigger questions of, should we be bringing cases right now? Number one, that it's very difficult for cases to be processed because of courthouse slowdowns. They're on skeletal staffs, judges not necessarily wanting to bring people in for unnecessary arraignments. So I think prosecutors are having to make decisions about whether this is the right time for certain takedowns, but also knowing what's going on in the jails right now. I think ethical and responsible prosecutors have to keep an eye to the situation that is happening in the jails and really ask themselves the question, is this the right time to be arresting certain people?
And go to the defense side for a second. We know we're afforded the right of a fair and speedy trial. Does that go out the window right now, at least the speedy part of this, Berit? Because, you're not going to get your day in court because there's not going to be dates to meet in court. Everything grinds to a halt, I would assume, for the foreseeable future because.
Yeah, I think the speedy trial, it doesn't go out the window all the way. So normally you are supposed to be able to have your trial in the federal system 70 days after you're arrested. So that's probably not going to happen in most cases now. For example, in the eastern and southern districts of New York, where I used to work, they've now pushed all trials that were supposed to be starting until April 27th. So they're pushing everything back. That doesn't mean that people are going to be allowed to sit in jail indefinitely without having a trial date. I'm positive that the courts are keeping close tabs of this and keeping an eye to that and are going to try to have trials as soon as possible. I mean, this really is a situation where they're trying to balance due process rights with public health concerns. I think it is, again, this is why I go back to this idea of prosecutors having to think responsibly right now when they're arresting people, knowing that it is going to be a longer process. People may be spending longer time in jail pre-trial, so they have to be very intentional in making those decisions. But no, I don't think due process will be thrown out the window altogether. Even in other times of crisis, people have still managed to have trials, and I think the criminal justice system will still figure out a way to have people have their day in court.
Just how weird is it, Berit, that everything's shuttered? I mean, in all walks of life. But I wasn't thinking, and I said, I want to talk to Berit about this, but the whole court system. And obviously the attention of law enforcement, and I know they can walk and chew gum, and they're obviously pursuing certain cases, but there's a lot of cases right now, admittedly and understandably, they're not pursuing right now because of the pandemic and everything attached to it right now. So many things that we just took as normal, they're unrecognizable now.
They absolutely are. And I do think the court system is one of those interesting, essential functions that, look, it doesn't have the liberty to shut down altogether. It just doesn't. It's, in many ways, similar to hospitals in the sense that there are things that have to be done even in the face of danger. And I think dealing with defendants who are in jail or dealing with people who are breaking the law, right? Those things have to be addressed. The court systems just, they can't shut down altogether. You cannot have a system where people are lawlessly able to go about their day with not being held to account. You have to have a mechanism for that. But you also have to balance the public health concerns, right? I mean, if you have jury trials, it will be very difficult to find 12 men and women willing to sit in person on a jury to deliberate in a case because of the health risks. So there are serious constitutional issues, there are serious practical issues, and this is something the court systems have not really had to confront. I mean, after Hurricane Sandy, we saw this on a much more limited scale. We had delays that were pushed, we had scramble, we had extended speedy trial concerns, but that was for a much shorter period of time. And seeing that this may go on for months still, we're really in new territory here.
Berit, thank you as always. I'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Thanks.
All right, everyone. When we come back, we really switch gears. We're going to be speaking with the Mooch. That would be Anthony Scaramucci. He'll join us to discuss his former boss, the president. If anyone's got insight on Donald Trump, it's him. He'll try to explain why it's been so difficult for his boss this latest crisis and what he thinks is going on behind the scenes.